Alright guys, last 24 hours extremely exciting, and don't tell me you didn't see it because I watched that 10-minute clip at least 3 times, and this is some next level drama. So we have a lot of ground to cover today. We'll definitely have to cover what happened yesterday and how the big mineral deal just crashed and burned, and the look on Marco Rubio's face was just priceless. But let's do a big update on the trade war first because the Russia-Ukraine war obviously isn't ending anytime soon, and after that debacle, a ceasefire is nowhere in sight. Meanwhile, the United States, they're gonna take another gamble. They are now telling Canada to punish China to avoid getting clobbered themselves. Scott Bessent, the Treasury Head, is ordering Canada to follow Mexico and impose big tariffs on Chinese goods. Bessent wants to create this fortress North America against China. Now, this is some Marvel villain stuff from a movie, but this is 2025 and anything goes with Trump in the White House. And just like Mexico, this is a backdoor offer given to Canada to save their export economy. Now, the end goal was always to contain China's industries, which is America's biggest economic rival. Now, understand the underlying motivation of Bessent and the US tariff. It's all about either bending countries to Trump's will or raking in a ton of money for the government.
And we think about it three ways. One can be revenues for the government. Two can be to make trade fair, because a lot of our trading partners do not treat us fairly. And three, President Trump uses them for negotiating, as he did with Colombia, as you're seeing with Mexico, with Canada, with the fentanyl crisis that we're having. So there's a chance that the tariffs could bring in a substantial amount of revenue for the government. So, for instance, a 10% global tariff would bring in $2.5 trillion over 10 years.
So Bessent has confirmed the playbook. Tariffs now have a dual-use purpose. A 10% tariff on the world would bring in $2.5 trillion for the US government in a decade. But notice he didn't say the truth out loud. This money will be coming from importers and consumers. Or they would use tariffs to assemble a coalition of countries, especially in the Western Hemisphere, to block out trade with China. For over 20 years, Chinese goods have been flowing at record amounts into North America, from under $200 billion a year to almost $700 billion. And over the years, both Mexico and Canada, they have been importing increasing amounts of stuff from China. So even as US trade with Beijing starts to drop, the absolute amount with North America is still rising. It's simple why Mexico and Canada are buying more Chinese goods. It's the same reason why the world, people like you and me, are buying from Chinese suppliers. It's to import in deflation to bring down the cost of living. It's very simple. However, this poses a problem for the US. Now, if America wants to build up their industries and churn out expensive products, they will need customers to buy said products that cost much more. But in a free market, it won't be possible. And that's why the US is trying to turn Canada and Mexico into captive markets to block out Chinese products for American-made goods. Canada and Mexico are enormous markets for US exports. In 2023, the US sold almost $600 billion worth of stuff up north and down south. And that's almost 1/3 of total US exports. Now pay attention to this part. As the US ramps up their tariff war on the world, input costs starts to go up. That part is mighty obvious. So products coming out of US factories will be more expensive. And in a globalized world, Mexico and Canada, they won't buy from the US. They will just head elsewhere, which probably means buying from Chinese suppliers. Now, when Scott Bessent tells Canada or Mexico to tariff Chinese goods, here's the real message decoded. We want you to block out more competitive Chinese goods so that you will buy our overpriced stuff. And if you don't, US tariffs will crush your economy because we have the biggest consumer market in the world. This is basically a strategy to lock in Canada forever as a captive customer. These are the US states heavily dependent on exports to their neighbors. In fact, Canada is the top export market for 36 US states. Across the US, many individual states are surviving directly on trade with Canada. North Dakota, for example, 79% of total exports goes into Canada. If Trump doesn't have a captive market ready when prices goes up, where else are the US products going to flow to? China, Asia, Europe and emerging economies won't buy them if there are more affordable alternatives out there. The tariff war will still hollow out the US industrial base unless Bessent locks Canada and Mexico in. And the best way to do that is the Fortress America plan to block out Chinese goods. But it kind of goes deeper than that. And let's say Canada takes the bait and they tariff away all Chinese goods. Do you realize what that does to their own industries? When Canada imports stuff from China, not all are consumption goods. Over 30% were intermediate goods. Imports from China also accounts for 12% of Canada's total imports. So if Canada was to follow US orders and tariff China, they will be hurting their own industries. Input costs will go up, and they will be even less competitive in the global economy. And that increases the dependency on US consumers even more. So this is just one big vicious cycle that Bessent is trying to push. But if Canada decides not to play ball, then, well, US tariffs will crash the economy in the short term. Now, after Trump confirmed the 25% tariff, the Canadian dollar collapsed by almost 1% immediately. And because we are in the dollar system, exports into Canada now cost even more. So the cost of living crisis and manufacturing problem just got worse. And if you're Canadian, I'm sorry to say that inflation is going to heat up for you. There's no sugarcoating this. Now, like Mexico, Canada has to choose. Either embrace a recession and get a chance to diversify trade, or you accept the deal. Yes, you avoid pain, but you become part of Fortress America forever. But let's talk about Bessent's latest nightmare, which is also Marco Rubio's worst moment as Secretary of State. The entire plan for Ukrainians' resources just got obliterated, and even Bessent has lost it big time. He says Zelensky blew up a fantastic minerals deal and that he doesn't want peace. Well, of course, it was fantastic for the United States. Bessent saw this as the holy grail of supply chains to help the US secure rare earths, especially when competing with China. But we all saw what happened, didn't we? It was an epic 10-minute meltdown that saw Trump scold Zelensky, cutting him down to size. And all of Bessent's hard work went down the tubes.
We were supposed to bring the Ukrainian people closer to the U.S. people, send a strong signal to Russian leadership that they had not only shared values, but now shared economic interest. Instead, President Zelensky and I had a very tough 45-minute meeting at a very loud decibel level, and I kept telling him, Mr. President, the purpose of this is to show the Russians there is no daylight between us. And at the end of the meeting, he said, well, I'm not signing this. And I said, at the end of the meeting, I said to him, what do you want to go out and tell the press? I said, because I don't want to go out and show the Russians that there's daylight in between us. And he said, well, I'm going to go out and say I'll sign it in Munich. Then he got to Munich and he ran into Vice President Vance and Secretary Rubio, but he didn't sign the agreement. So finally, we were supposed to have the signing today. It was supposed to be a great day, and this is one of the biggest own goals in diplomatic history.
So instead of smiling and signing the deal, we basically had Trump lecturing Zelensky and then kicking him out of the White House. Now for the US, this is a big loss of face, a big loss in tangible resources, and a big setback for Trump's global trade war. But even if the deal did go through, is it really what the US expects it to be? And we have all heard the figures, trillions of dollars under the ground. Now some people say it's 10 trillion worth of mineral deposits, but is that even the truth? According to the US Geological Survey, it's mostly an illusion. Ukraine doesn't have rare earths. The biggest reserves belongs to China at 44 million tons. Going down the list, we have Vietnam, Brazil, and Russia, but Ukraine isn't a significant player here. If we look carefully, the rare earths market have been cornered by the BRICS countries, and all of them are either allied with China, part of BRICS, or they have deep economic partnerships with Beijing. Trump wants rare earths to flow into the US economy. After all, he wants to build everything from semiconductors to EVs. But it seems Ukraine has nothing to offer. So who do we believe? The Ukrainian survey or America's own agency? The numbers get even more ridiculous. And let's assume Ukraine did have substantial amounts of rare earths beneath the ground. How long will it take the US to recoup their money? Even if Ukraine can produce 20% of the world's rare earths, it would equate to only $3 billion annually. To reach Trump's target of $500 billion, the United States will need to secure 150 years of Ukrainian output, and by then would rare earths even be needed? None of us will ever know by then. The numbers are simply ridiculous when we look at global commodity production. The total oil market today brings in $2.7 trillion in revenue, $250 billion for copper, but scant $15 billion only from rare earths. Even if Ukraine controls global production tomorrow, the US will still need to harvest the minerals for over 30 years non-stop. We aren't even counting in the cost of production, the cost of protection, and building all the infrastructure in the country. So this mineral deal might have never been feasible in the first place. There are also many reports that the Russian-controlled oblasts, they contain the majority of the minerals in Ukraine. So the whole situation is just one big grand mess. This is bad news for Ukraine, because after the Oval Office meltdown, there's a chance that the US, they'll simply walk away and call it quits. The Ukrainian estimates show an extremely optimistic picture. There seems to be reserves of lithium, uranium, and titanium. Everything from graphite to iron, they are located in the country. Apparently, there's $15 trillion in wealth and Europe's largest reserves of key minerals under the ground. Now, I can't prove or disprove it, so I'll just leave this to your better judgment. But if American surveyors, they go in and they contradict the claims, then it's essentially game over. Trump really wants his minerals. Even Russia is dangling the rare earths cart in front of him. But as always, let me know what you think. Will Canada punish China to avoid US tariffs? Will Trump ever get his rare earths from Ukraine? Let me know in the comments below, and let's play the outro. I present to you Donald Trump, the President of the United States, scolding Zelensky of Ukraine. Now check this out and have a great day ahead.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that.
That's
Remember
exactly what
this. You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel. We're going to feel very good.
You will feel influenced.
We're going to feel very good and very strong.
You will feel influenced.
You're right now not in a very good position. You've allowed yourself to be in a very bad position, and he happens to be right about it.
From the very beginning of the war.
You're not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having cards. Right now, you don't. You're playing cards. You're playing cards. You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.